This is one of the most terrifying photographs in human history. Astronaut Bruce McCandless's first silent spacewalk. He didn't speak for 3 days after returning, and a NASA psychiatrist asked him what was wrong. He said, "I see the Earth breathing," and the doctor thought he was insane. But later, more and more astronauts reported the same symptoms. They said that when you stare at the Earth from space for more than 30 seconds, you see it expanding and contracting like a giant lung. This isn't a hallucination. It's because your brain can't comprehend it. An object with a diameter of 12,742 kilometers is clearly visible in your field of vision. Your cerebellum automatically adds breathing movements to make this absurd image believable. Even more terrifying is that if you stare for too long, you feel like the Earth is staring back at you. NASA calls this the reversed perspective effect. Not that you are observing the Earth, but that the Earth is observing you. 30% of astronauts have experienced this. They say it's more terrifying than seeing aliens, because you suddenly realize that you thought you were the observer, but you are just a cell in this blue monster. But this is only the surface-level terror of the perspective effect. What truly breaks the astronauts is what happened next. On December 24, 1968, Apollo 8 astronaut William Anders took the historic photograph during his lunar orbit. The moment he raised the camera, his hand trembled, not from weightlessness, but from a sudden realization. He wasn't photographing a planet. He was photographing the coffin of all human civilization. Do you know that feeling? It's like playing a game for 20 years, and suddenly one day you exit the game and see the computer screen running it. In that instant, everything in the game, quests, equipment, levels, becomes code, becomes nothingness. William Anders experienced this cognitive collapse in lunar orbit. It took him 3 years after returning to Earth to dare speak publicly about what he saw that day. Even more bizarrely, in 2014, neuroscientists used functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, to scan the brains of 17 astronauts and discovered a startling secret. When these individuals recalled their space experiences, their brains' default mode networks showed abnormally synchronized firing. This area is responsible for self-awareness and spatial orientation, but in the astronaut's brain, its activity patterns are almost identical to those of someone who has experienced a near-death experience. In other words, seeing Earth from space is essentially a mini-death of the soul. This isn't a metaphor. It's a real neurological change. Your brain has a structure called the prehysteresis loop, which is responsible for constructing your spatial frame of reference, telling you where you are and where the world is. But when you're 320 kilometers in the air and see Earth floating like a marble, this system instantly shuts down because your prehysteresis loop evolved on Earth's surface. It simply doesn't have the capacity to process this kind of information. As a result, your brain activates an emergency protection mechanism, forcibly creating a sense of integration. One astronaut described it particularly accurately. "I felt like I was no longer an independent individual. I became part of the Earth, or rather, the Earth became part of me." This feeling isn't romantic despair. It's a cognitive disorder, an extreme measure your brain takes to avoid complete collapse. But the truly terrifying part is yet to come. In 2007, a Japanese neuroscience team conducted an experiment where 30 participants wore VR glasses to simulate the view of Earth from the International Space Station. After just 15 minutes, 43% experienced varying degrees of blurred self-boundaries. Some couldn't distinguish their hands from the table. Some felt their consciousness expanding outwards, and 2 even broke down, claiming they didn't know who they were. And this was just a VR simulation. The real space experience is 100 times more powerful because in space, your senses receive a series of contradictory messages. Your eyes tell you Earth is small, your reason tells you Earth is large, your body tells you you're floating, and your memory tells you you should have weight. These contradictions create a huge cognitive black hole in your brain, and the overall effect is the gravitational pull of this black hole. Even more disturbing is that this effect is irreversible. Neuroscientists tracked 63 astronauts and found that even 10 years after returning to Earth, their brain structures remained different from ordinary people. Specifically, the brain regions responsible for processing the boundaries between self and others were permanently weakened. What does this mean? This means they can no longer take it for granted that I am me and the world is the world, like ordinary people do. A retired astronaut said something in an interview that left everyone silent for 30 seconds. "What I miss most isn't my family and friends on Earth, nor the food and music. What I miss most is that happiness of not knowing the truth. Every day when I open my eyes, I remember the Earth hanging in darkness, that fragility, that loneliness, that absurdity. This memory is like a thorn, forever stuck in my brain, impossible to pull out." But you might ask, if it's so painful, why do these astronauts repeatedly apply to go to space? The answer is even more bizarre. Because they're addicted. Psychologists call this transcendental experience addiction. When your brain has experienced the extreme of the dissolution of self-boundaries, all stimuli on Earth will become tasteless. It's like after you've eaten the spiciest chili pepper, ordinary food will become tasteless. NASA has an internal report that has never been made public, which records an even more extreme case. In 1996, an astronaut was on a mission on the International Space Station and spent 6 hours a day for 3 consecutive days staring at Earth. His colleagues noticed that something was wrong with him because he didn't eat, sleep, or speak. He just floated quietly in front of the window, staring at the blue planet without blinking. On the 4th day, when his colleagues forcibly dragged him away, he said something that sent chills down everyone's spine. "I finally understand. We've never truly lived. We're just replaying a video of what has already happened." After returning to Earth, this man was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder and underwent 5 years of psychological treatment. Even today, he insists on what he saw in space. He says that when you stare at Earth continuously for a certain period, you see things you shouldn't see, not hallucinations, but the hidden truth of this planet. He refuses to reveal what he saw specifically, only repeatedly saying that some truths humanity isn't ready to accept. So, what exactly does the perspective effect change in astronauts? Neuroscientists answer with their sense of time. For ordinary people, time is linear, past, present, future, one after another. But for astronauts who have experienced the perspective effect, their sense of time becomes spherical. It sounds fantastical, but there's scientific evidence. When you look at Earth from space, some of the light you see comes from atmospheric reflection, taking 0.001 seconds to reach your eyes, while some comes from ocean refraction, taking 0.002 seconds. This minuscule time difference creates a peculiar effect on your retina. You feel as if you are simultaneously seeing Earth's past and present. A physicist has proposed a more radical theory. The telescope effect might be a sign that the human brain is experiencing four-dimensional space for the first time. He believes that when you look at Earth from space, your brain briefly breaks through the limitations of three-dimensional space, perceiving the true structure of space-time. This also explains why many astronauts experience a sense of seeing through everything after returning from space. Not that they've become smarter, but that their perception has temporarily increased. However, this theory is too advanced for mainstream science to accept. One thing is certain, though, the telescope effect is rewriting humanity's understanding of consciousness because it proves that our self-perception, our unwavering belief in who we are, is merely a story fabricated by the brain to allow us to survive on Earth's surface. When you leave Earth's surface, this story begins to collapse. Even more astonishingly, recent research has found that you don't need to actually go to space to experience part of the telescope effect. In 2019, a research team developed an Earth meditation method that allows participants to, in a VR environment, participants viewed Earth from different altitudes. The results showed that when the viewing altitude exceeded 10,000 kilometers, the participants' sense of self-boundaries began to loosen. At altitudes exceeding 100,000 kilometers, 30% experienced the illusion of merging with Earth. And at an altitude of 380,000 kilometers, almost everyone experienced some degree of cognitive restructuring. This finding suggests that the viewpoint effect may not be exclusive to astronauts. It's a mechanism deep within the human brain that, once activated, permanently alters how we perceive the world. With the increasing prevalence of commercial space travel, this effect may become even more pronounced in the future. Within 20 years, hundreds of thousands of people may experience this cognitive shock. What changes will occur in human civilization then? Will more people realize the illusion of national borders and the absurdity of war? Or will more people suffer mental breakdowns because they cannot bear the truth? No one knows the answer, but one thing is certain. When you truly see this planet clearly from the outside, you can never go back. Not that you can never go back to Earth, but that you can never go back to the self that did not know the truth. It does not drive you mad, but makes you see the madness of our collective.